Welcome to Games Through the Decades, where we talk about video game design and their impacts on culture. This episode, we will discuss some games from the 1980s, the video game crash of 1983, and the rise of home consoles. I'm Cohen.
I'm Nathan.
Enrique.
And we are Games Through the Decades.
The city has 4,000 to 5,000 video games.
We don't know how to free Zelda.
PlayStation 2.
So let's talk about Pacman, right? The events that led up to Pacman being developed. So to start off, Pacman was a huge game in the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first to enter the realms of popular culture. The creator of Pacman, Toru Iwatani, wanted everyone to feel happy, and that is his first priority when game developing of Pacman. That's all he wanted to do, especially when it comes to gathering families, and, you know, guys are always gamers. So he wanted the females to come and join it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Toro is already in the licensed field of the black and white Atari video games. So what gave Toro the idea of Pacman himself was ordering a pizza and took one slice and saw the character from there. For the ghost, of course, the characters, that was basically from a scenario of Tom and Jerry. And Pacman was released, and reception was, back in 1980 by Namco. The original Pac-Man was a huge success, becoming one of the highest grossing games of all time. In its first 10 years, Pac-Man grossed over $3.5 billion in lifetime sales. And that was a little bit of fast history of Pac-Man.
Pac-Man came in the beginning of the video game craze, but he was nearly one of the last, as in 1983, the video game market spiraled into a crash. This was due to heavy saturation, poor quality, and a shift to PCs. Many companies would close entirely. However, some would survive with heavy layoffs, with Atari laying off over 30% of its staff. Atari was the most affected, losing over $536 million, which today would be $16 billion in 2024.
That's crazy.
It is. By the end of that would be by the end of 1983. So, total revenue of the game industry would fall from $3.2 billion in 1983 to barely over $100 million by the end of the year. Due to the crash, Atari decided to bury excess games and consoles in a landfill in New Mexico, but denied this up until 2014. Arcades, which were already on the decline, were also hit hard, losing 4% of the revenue and over 1,500 arcades closing. Many investors believe that the video game craze was at its end.
One of the things that saved the gaming industry from the crash was the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1986. Hiroshi Yamauchi was the president of Nintendo when the Famicom released in July 15th, 1983, but it didn't receive a whole lot of attention because of a bad chip. A lot of them were sent back. It was originally meant to be more of a computer rather than a gaming console because that's where things were going at the time. People wanted home computers rather than game consoles. They had to develop an entire new system using an LED screen to actually develop the sprites. And they were originally going to make the cartridges the size of cassette tapes, but they ended up making them twice the size to help with marketing. Atari was actually going to be the ones marketing the Famicom to the US as the NES, but a month after Nintendo proposed the idea to Atari, the CEO was fired because of all of the things that were going on with Atari.
Yeah, I bet it was.
The NES actually came to the US first not as a console, but as an arcade cabinet called Nintendo Versus Systems, where they would put their NES games on arcade cabinets to test how popular they would be before releasing the console. The NES released to the US on September 27th, 1986. And one of the reasons it was able to revive the gaming market in the U.S. was because they significantly upped the quality control. As one of the reasons to the gaming crash was the oversaturate. Yeah, lots of bad quality games. So that was one of the reasons one of the things that Nintendo fixed was very strict quality control. They used a lot of terms, like instead of calling it a video game console, an entertainment system, and they didn't call the cartridges video games. They called them game packs so that they could sell them in toy stores, because video game stores really weren't around at the time. You could really only sell them in like computer stores.
Yeah, makes sense.
The superior quality and caused sales to boom. The NES has sold 60 million units worldwide. One of the most popular games on the NES was Super Mario Bros., which was actually developed by 5 people in 6 months.
Dang, I grew up playing that.
It was based on the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, which was released on one of those Nintendo Versus systems. And a little fun fact, Mario and Luigi were actually supposed to ride in a rocket ship and shoot at enemies.
There's no way that's true.
That's true. That was on the Wikipedia that I was reading.
That would be so cool.
That's all for this week of Games Through the Decades. We went through the history of Pac-Man, the video game crash of 1983, and the revival brought on by the Nintendo's NES and the Super Mario Bros. Join us next week where we talk about video gaming in the 90s, the rise of three-dimensional games that brought us into the modern world. I'm Cohen.
I'm Nathan.
I'm Enrique.
And we are Games Through the Decades.